There are 44 different countries in Europe, and a few more sovereign nations. And yet, so many of us end up in the same places. Rome, Paris, Madrid, London, Santorini, and countless more. There's no denying that these places are popular for a reason. They're stunning, they're packed with history, and they're easy to get to from most parts of the world. But what if you added a few other cities to your itinerary while you were there? So in today's video, we're going to talk about all of the cities that I love in Europe that are a little bit underrated. They're not undiscovered. They're not cities that you've probably never heard of, but they are awesome places that tend to get left off of people's itineraries when they're traveling to Europe and looking to hit up the biggest and the best. A lot of these cities are packed with history, they have incredible food, and because they get fewer tourists, it's a little bit more affordable than the bigger cities in the same country, a little bit more affordable because you're in a different country that doesn't get as much tourism. You're able to explore and visit museums without booking way ahead of time or like having to wait in line to get a ticket or to get in somewhere. The restaurants don't require you to have, a reservation a month in advance. And just in general, the locals are happier for tourists to be there because it's not as much of a burden on their city as it is in some of these bigger places. So without further ado, let's get to the list. We'll start in Greece, one of the most touristed countries in all of Europe. Many people arrive to Athens, spend a day or two in Athens, and then immediately head out to one of the islands, especially Mykonos, Santorini, even Paros and Naxos, where I went a few years ago, are starting to get incredibly busy. So one of the places that I absolutely love, and in general the whole region of the Peloponnese, but specifically Nafplio, it was once the capital of Greece for a short period of time, so it has tons of history. There are some really great stories lurking around the alleyways. There's a beautiful castle on a hill, a fortress that you can climb up to or get a taxi up to. The food is incredible there. If you're headed there in the summertime, you can go to the beach there. There's also like little swimming pools, like rock pools that they've created along the coastline so you can go swimming in a really calm part of the sea. It's pretty easy to get to. You can rent a car from the Athens airport and drive there in about 2.5 hours, I believe. And then with a car, you can use Nafplio as a base to explore so many other parts of the Peloponnese. I'll put in the description below a link to some of the videos, not only of my experience in Nafplio, but a couple of other parts of that beautiful region of Greece. I highly recommend adding it to your Greek itinerary. Maybe not skipping the islands, but if you've been to some of the Greek islands before, this is a really awesome alternative which allows you to see a completely different side of Greece and really get off the beaten path. It's especially fantastic if you love hiking, but just in general, getting lost in the little alleyways and the little villages up in the mountains is really just, it's such a special part of Greece. So I highly recommend adding Nafplio and many little places around the Peloponnese to your European itinerary. Next up, we have a city, again in a country that is very heavily touristed, but when I went to this city and I made the video, I actually called this video, I think, the most underrated city in Italy, and that is Genoa. It is such a beautiful part of the country. It's on the west coast, kind of. I used it as a jumping off point to head into Cinque Terre. The city itself is well worth visiting. It's the home of focaccia, the home of, I think, salami. There's so much good food. Pesto is from this region. It's so delicious. So you can definitely eat well, but there's a ton of history. It was once a huge maritime port and one of the richest cities in Europe. So the architecture is incredible. The museums are fantastic. There's some great hotels and little Airbnbs. And again, it's such a quiet city compared to other places around Italy that you likely have on your hit list. So I really recommend adding Genoa to your Italy itinerary. One of the great things about Italy is that the trains are so fantastic for getting around. So even if you plan to have a trip in Florence or Milan or Rome, you can still get to Genoa on the same trip by taking a fast train and spending a few days there and exploring. One of my favorite European cities had to make the list, and that is Hamburg in Germany. Lots of people are starting to visit Germany more and more, and I think especially Americans who like to head over to Europe and want to have a different trip. Munich is a very popular place. If you're adding it on to a Swiss itinerary, lots of people, of course, go to Berlin. It's an awesome city. I really love it. But Hamburg just offers something a little bit different. I've been twice now, and I honestly think it's not only my favorite city in Germany, but it is one of my favorite cities in the world. It just has soul, but it has so much. There's so much history. The Beatles history there is so cool. The food scene is so good. The music scene, the nightlife. There's awesome concerts and like just great nightlife venues. The people of Hamburg are so fun. It's just an overall like a jovial place to be, which is not how I would describe many other places in Germany. But I really love it. I honestly think if you love music, if you love history, if you love good food, if you love big cities and that sort of big city weekend vibe, then I highly recommend, if you are living in Europe somewhere, to take a weekend trip to Hamburg, but also to add it to a longer German itinerary. It's not that far from Cologne, which you can get a train to. It does have an airport that you can fly into from other parts of Europe, so you can easily hop between Hamburg and maybe somewhere else on your itinerary. And of course, it has a fantastic train station that allows you to get there from other parts of Europe as well. One of the most underrated cities in Spain is actually smack dab in between the two most visited cities in Spain. So it's wild to me that people don't add it to their itineraries more often. If you're going to Spain and you're going to be spending some time in Barcelona, or you're going to be going and spending some time in Madrid, or you're going to be balancing your time between the two, you should stop in Zaragoza on the way in between. It's literally, I believe, an hour away by fast train from either of the cities, and it is awesome. It's honestly such a cool city. The food scene, the tapas bar scene is unbeatable. I ate so well when I was there, and I honestly would go back again just to do a little tapas crawl. There's loads of Roman history around, including baths and a Roman amphitheater, which is so cool. There are two churches that are worth visiting, one of which is absolutely stunning, and you can get a view of from the river, like looking back at it. It's so beautiful. Such an easy city to add to an itinerary. I really think that if you want to get off the beaten path a little bit while you're in Spain and have a completely different experience than what you're going to get in the incredibly crowded cities of Madrid and Barcelona, that you should definitely add Zaragoza to your itinerary. For those of you that have been around for a little while, you'll know that Paris is one of my favorite cities in the whole world. But I do try to branch out whenever I go back to France, make a little quick visit to Paris, and then head somewhere else. I love the south of France, but again, it's not exactly underrated. I think it's heavily rated, myself included. I love it down there. But a city in France that doesn't get the credit that it deserves, at least outside of France, I think, is the city of Lyon. It's so awesome. Foodies do not want to miss a trip to Lyon. Lyon is the gastronomic capital of France, which says a lot when food all over the country is incredible, if that's your sort of thing. But for me, it is my sort of thing, and the food in Lyon is unbeatable. It's so good. The bouchons, which are these restaurants that serve up traditional, really hearty meals, are scattered all over the city of varying price points, so you can have a really high-end meal, but you can also have a great local mom and pop experience in so many different parts of the city. So much history here. It's incredible. The old silk works. There's so many beautiful murals. The architecture is amazing. There's a little old town, but you also have a thriving city center with a fantastic public transportation. It's really easy to get around. It's easy to get to Lyon, like many other parts of France. The train network is really awesome, so you can easily get here. I added it onto a trip to Paris a couple of years ago, and honestly, it was so easy to get between the two cities. I believe it was like a 3-hour or 4-hour train journey. So super easy to do on like a 2-week trip by adding it onto something like that, or adding it to south of France, or adding it to your trip to Provence. You will not regret it, honestly, the food. Now, since the title of this video is underrated cities, I couldn't go ahead and start naming regions or national parks in the UK, like the Lake District or the Peak District or the Cotswolds, right? Although, heavily underrated, especially the Lake District and the Peak District for international visitors. They are very popular places for British people. Everybody knows about them, and I don't think that they think it's underrated, but as an visitor from abroad coming to the UK, so many people simply go to London and Edinburgh and pretty much leave. And there are so many cool cities in the UK, one of them being Liverpool. I've been here a couple of times, and every time I go, it seems like it's gotten even cooler. There are so many great museums, there are so many good pubs, there's a really decent food scene, and not just good quality British food, but lots of international cuisine around the city. The architecture is really cool, and of course, it's the home of the Beatles. So there's a lot of history to explore. The Beatles Museum is there. It's so cool. The Maritime Museum is here, which is really fantastic. And it's just a beautiful place to spend a couple of days to get away from the hustle and bustle of London and the biggest city, and the one that is probably more international than anything else. If you want to go to a British city and really experience what it must be like to live in this country rather than just visit it, I really recommend adding Liverpool to your itinerary. It's such a cool place to explore, and one of my favorites. But if you have more time, the Lake District is also cool. I get a little bit more off the beaten path now to countries and cities that maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe you haven't had on your radar. One is a city called Turku, which is located in Finland. I went there a couple summers ago when I went to Helsinki, which is an amazing place, and I highly recommend going there. But if you want to really get off the beaten path and go somewhere that not a ton of international tourists go to, I really recommend adding Turku to your Finnish itinerary. It's super easy to get to by train or bus from Helsinki, and it's so beautiful. We went in June. The days were so long. This beautiful archipelago with tons of little islands. There's also tons of hiking and walking, a great museum, a really great food scene, and it's a small enough city that you can see a lot of it in a short period of time. Some of the best food we had in Finland was in Turku. There's a ton of different markets that you can get food from, which is really delicious. And it's just a really beautiful place to get out and enjoy a little bit of the nature. If you want to swim in the Baltic, this is a good spot to dip your toes. There's a couple of beaches. There's saunas right by the beaches, so you can kind of hop in and out of the heat and the cool in the sea. A place that you can add to that same itinerary is to Tallinn in Estonia. You can actually take the ferry from Tallinn to Helsinki or vice versa. You can fly into Finland and then take the ferry to Tallinn. Tallinn is such a cool city. It's one of my favorite cities in the Baltics. I'm really sorry, don't tell the Lithuanians. But I absolutely love Tallinn. The vibe is just really creative. There's a lot of repurposed old buildings, places that used to be warehouses are now really cool creative hubs full of great restaurants, art galleries, craft beer bars. The history is amazing. The city center itself has so much history. The architecture is stunning, and there are so many great museums here. So if you want a really cultural vacation, I recommend adding the sort of Tallinn, Helsinki, Turku trifecta, and you'll have a really great trip. Now imagine making a video all about underrated cities in Europe and not talking about one that I lived close to for 2 years, and that is Vilnius in Lithuania. For some reason, when people create Baltic itineraries, they tend to just go to Riga and Tallinn. They don't maybe make enough time to add the third city, and when they're trying to decide between the three, Vilnius seems to be the one that gets left off the most. I think it's just not as famous as Riga. Riga's this great party place, or has a reputation for being so, and then Tallinn is very different. Overall, Estonia is very different from Latvia. But Vilnius is so cool. Vilnius is such a great city, and because it doesn't receive the amount of tourism yet that Riga and Tallinn get, you just have a different, quieter, more affordable vibe. And because Lithuania is so small, you can see a lot of the country from Vilnius in a short period of time. You can rent a car and explore it that way. You can use the train network. You can go to the coast. If you're gonna add a second underrated city in Lithuania to your list, Klaipėda is really cool. It's right on the coast of the Baltic. You have the Curonian Spit, which you can take a ferry to and then explore by bus or car. It's one of the most beautiful places that I've been to in the world. The Curonian Spit is magical. The rough waters, ice cold waters of the Baltic Sea, the beaches there, the sand dunes, it's so stunning. And the dried fish and like the seafood there is so good. So if you like seafood and you really like that sort of like Northern European cuisine, then I highly recommend both Vilnius and a little side trip to Klaipėda and the Cronian Spit. You can have a whole Baltic trip, but don't leave Vilnius off of your Baltics itinerary. It's such a cool city. It has so much history, and the food in Lithuania is so underrated. It's so good, it's so hearty. And if you come in the summer, you're guaranteed incredibly long, beautiful, sunny, hot days. So yeah, don't miss out on that. I hope you found this video helpful. If I missed out on a city that you think is a little underrated around Europe, let me know in the comments below. It's an enormous continent, right? There are so many places to explore that aren't the usual spots. And I really hope that this helped highlight some places that you can easily add to an itinerary that still includes those places that you really want to visit, but also allows you to get away from the crowds, to get to know a country a little bit deeper by getting away from the Disneyification of the bigger touristy towns. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really supports my channel, and I will see you next time.